Hey there YouTube, I'm Ikitsu, this is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Total War Warhammer 2. So today I want to talk about another specific unit, and that's the White Lions of Krace. Now, this is a unit that gets a lot of flack for being absolute garbage, and they kind of are. Honestly speaking, their biggest flaw is that they only have 5,475 hit points. I think if they were given 6,500 hit points, which would basically be sort of the still kind of weak unit, but functional at that point in time, they'd be fine. But you can sort of cross-compare them to other units and see that their stats are actually pretty bad for their particular role. I mean, you could take a quick look at, for example, the Dwarves, compare them in across sort of thing to the Longbeards with great weapons. Longbeard's cheaper, I would argue, substantially better than the White Lions of Krace. The extra 5 points of leadership, the extra 10 points armor, not too important, but the extra 975 hit points is quite a big deal there. The fact that the Dwarves actually have a little bit more melee defense, pretty big deal. Obviously, the White Lions are a little bit of a more offense-oriented unit, but again, I think this is another one of those cases where the High Elves are being charged for martial prowess as though they had plus 12 melee defense and plus 2 melee attack, because I don't feel as though this unit deserves to cost more than the Longbeards. Dwarves, like I said, though, they have a sort of special case going on. They have extra powerful units for heavy infantry to compensate for the fact that that's kind of what they need to have. So, fine. But you can take a look at someone other faction that doesn't really have that excuse, that has really good other things, and take a look at, for example, the Foot Squires for the Bretonnians. These guys are 100 points cheaper, they have 735 more hit points. Yes, the White Lions have more statistics than them, but lacking that sort of weapon strength versus infantry. The fact that the White Lions are actually a little bit lower on weapon strength overall, the fact that their stats just aren't really that much better, honestly, and that they cost 100 points more. The White Lions are not actually a good comparison, I find, in that sort of matchup. And they have the same role. I do not feel like the White Lions of Krace are meant to be a more versatile unit that's good at fighting monsters and good at fighting infantry, because there's nothing really about them that screams that they're good at fighting cavalry or something like that to me. They're certainly not a bonus versus large kind of unit. So the fact that they don't have that bonus versus infantry does mean to me that for an 800 point unit, they should either have just higher general stats or a lower cost when compared to that kind of unit. And you could also sort of compare it to other kinds of units, more elite stuff. You could go over to the Warriors of Chaos and take a look at, for example, the Chaos Warriors with great weapons. Again, we're probably looking at a unit that has slight advantages just to sort of make up for the fact that Chaos has sort of limitations in terms of what they have. But the Chaos Warrior with great weapons for 50 points more has 1,275 more hit points. That mount is just whack bonkers. Much higher stats overall, I find, except for speed and melee defense and melee attack are kind of actually pretty similar. But higher charge bonus and weapon strength means that these guys are going to be able to get in there and just crush units in a way that the Swordmaster or the White Lions don't. And they're very similar in price point. I do think that the speed doesn't matter too much with these kinds of units, although it can if you're going for a very fast blitz strategy, which is where I think the White Lions kind of work okay. The problem is that, like, since the High Elves aren't designed around a blitz strategy of just swarm and overwhelm the enemy, their units that are designed for doing that aren't very well equipped for that kind of fighting. The Swordmasters of Hoth aren't really a blitz in and destroy everything kind of unit, really. They're more of a push through the enemy line by killing everything and blending through everything kind of way, which is a bit different. Since they have to fight off like 3 or 4 units individually, the Swordmasters are going to be stuck in combat for forever. The White Lions of Krace don't survive that. They have to be able to kill a unit, knock it out, get past it, and into the next unit. So for them, they're really stuck fighting weaker units, lower tier units that cost less than them, and hoping that they're able to sort of punch through so quickly that their lack of melee defense and their lack of hit points doesn't really hit them that badly. So they're not a very great unit, but they do fit into a place in the High Elf roster, and that's mostly because they sort of violate the standard meta of the High Elves. Kind of like with that all-cavalry build that I showed against Dark Elves. I think that when you're up against something like, say, the Dwarves or maybe even Empire, the White Lions can have a place in your composition just so that you can swarm past and around and through all of the enemy units really quickly, demolishing them before they can really do anything about the fact that you can sort of just wade through a lot of their cheaper chaff units with the White Lions and their high charge bonus. So we've got an example video here, and let's go ahead and find it. So yeah, like The real thing about this is that if I took Swordmasters and tried to use them for that same role, not only would I have to have many, many fewer units, those fewer units would be fighting off a whole bunch more enemy units individually. They might get worn down in that case, and it would be harder for me to exploit gaps because I wouldn't have any spare units, so I wouldn't be able to sort of move through and attack the Thunderers or the War Machines there, and I also wouldn't have the ability to sort of shrug off losses, because with the White Lions, even though I'm going to be taking quite a lot of damage and they have like no hit points, their ability to sort of take hit point damage is a lot greater because I have a lot more units of them. So the overall hit points per cost is still good. I've got my army set up in a sort of two-pronged formation here. We've got White Lines of Crace in each of these forests, screening a couple of units of Swordmasters. This is when I think White Lions can work, is if you're blitzkrieging into a sort of defensive formation. We've got a bit of a corner camper over here, which is, you know, pretty standard bullshit from Dwarf players. You sort of expect it. If I really wanted to not lose against this kind of thing and I was really competitive, I would just sit at the opposite corner and say, well, fuck that, not worrying about that, not going to engage that. And you'll never lose against this kind of Dwarf player if that's what you're playing at. But as it is, I'm enough of a sport to try and fight it, honestly, which, So he has loads of these roadblock units. He's hoping to sort of tie me up so that he can fire away with his organ guns, with his grudge throwers, and with his 2 units of Thunderers here. He's hoping that he can get hits off against me, and sort of while I'm bogged down with the Dwarf Warriors, he can sort of just whittle down my melee units. He's got 1 unit of Dwarf Warriors here sort of as a spotter, but it doesn't really matter too much. I kind of don't have my units like super well coordinated, so these guys are all way far back, but we're moving up with our army. We're going to hope that he sort of shifts his stuff around as that's happening. You can see his grudge thrower firing away at my general. It's not really a great choice because my general does not really give a crap. You're not going to hit things like a general with that. Even those hits that look like they're getting him, they're not actually hitting him. On the other hand, those Thunderers can definitely deal some damage to him, so he's going to start backing off there. So, Mage trying to get a good flank shot. The biggest threat in his army is the organ guns. They're going to be able to sort of absolutely shred through and destroy all of the... look at that stupid shot hitting the tree. Yeah, they're able to sort of shred through Swordmasters really quickly, and it's quite a big pain there. Firing off Soul Siphon here at the organ gun. I think I was firing my other bow at this thing as well, but whatever. I think if I had overcast that, I might have been able to kill off the cannon itself, but I'm not 100% sure about the amount of hit points that those things have. 2 Illyrian Reavers sort of round up the army. They're going to try and get on their cannons, get around the back there. You can see that now that he's sort of faced his artillery the other direction to try and fire at my other stuff, we're going to run that in. We're just sort of blitzing past this unit here. It's getting hit by multiple units. That giant charge of like Swordmasters and White Lions clumping up there, getting that hit in, is going to cause these Dwarf Warriors to sort of die really quickly. And we're sort of splitting off with these White Lions to exploit gaps that he's left in his army, because we've got loads of space here to sort of do that with. I don't know what the hell I'm doing with these guys, honestly, but I should have charged into the rear of the Dwarf Warriors over here, although admittedly that would also... Oh, I probably am going after these Thunderers here. Either way, when I get them too. Swordmasters as well are coming after the Thunders. I think I took a big hit from artillery, actually, is what ended up doing these guys in. Still a big charge against those Thunderers against the flank there. He really had them overextended. I don't think he expected this kind of blitz strategy. And I don't think he expected me to bring Illyrian Reavers all the way across that way. Other Illyrian Reavers managed to get on top of the Grudge Thrower. Which is not that big a deal, but the Swordmasters over here, you can see, are being like picked apart by 3 units at the same time, or two units at the same time. And yeah, like that's not really a great situation for him to be in. Over here, White Lion's advancing, and you can see that we're getting picked apart by his artillery, and he's going after the Swordmasters, which is the smart idea, of course. But he's losing units over here, he's losing quite a lot over here. This unit of White Lions is going to lose this fight here because he's got his Lord in there, but we're going to be able to reinforce, charge in with more of our White Lions. That just broke through that other unit. And over here, we're able to sort of keep swarming around and keep pushing forward with these sort of still good units. Illyrian Reaver's forced to back off over here just because he's got too much stuff around here. Going to be a bit hard to get after this Grudge Thrower again, but over here I think we're firing at the Organ Gun with the Olithanar, and I think we're going to also chuck a shot from the High Mage. Still got this unit of Dwarf Warriors kind of looking for my High Mage, but I think he forgot about them. Over here, Swordmasters of Hoth, they're getting picked apart by his units here, but that's, again, to be expected. If you have all sword masters, they get picked apart by these kinds of things. Do charge into the rear of these thunderers, though, which is pretty good. Lothan are finally firing at these things, I think. This other unit of sword masters also sort of picking apart these things here. And yeah, if we can get rid of these organ guns, we're going to be fine. Although at this, like, my opponent does actually surrender quite early on. Nice rear charge with the Illyrian Reavers, which doesn't matter how good your charge with the Illyrian Reavers are. It's not going to do a huge amount, but it is enough to break the morale of this unit of miners, which is enough to get this Swordmaster unit some free kills there. Front line over here, he's still fighting a few of my White Lions, and they actually stay in the fight for quite a while, so the fact that he's got his Rune Lord here does help him a lot, but we've just crushed this sort of large blob of units over here, and we're now free with a whole bunch of White Lions. And like I said, you know, any situation where you're sort of outnumbering your opponent like that, you can deal a lot of damage, and sort of break through and exploit the sort of gaps that they've got. That's really what was happening in this particular battle, and my opponent's sort of quitting here. So yeah, like, I think that White Lions, while they're still not worth the cost that you pay for them, they are a worthwhile unit in certain circumstances and under certain conditions. And you can definitely make them the core and the heart of your army if you know what you're up against. But realistically, the only time that you're going to know that they're going to be useful, it's against dwarves. Other times they might be useful, but their stats really only gear them up for the particular fight against them. So yeah, if you find yourself up against dwarves, I showed you one of the sort of styles of fighting that you could do, which involved using the I can't remember, the gray I think, as a sort of way to get into the back line and pick away at their sort of softer units from behind where they're not really necessarily expecting, using their sort of snipe ability, and have your sort of general skirmishing with their line and just having a much longer battle. But if you want, you can just use White Lines of Crace, spam them out there, and have some other armor-piercing units along for the ride, and just sort of charge straight through the enemy lines there. You could even probably go with some Dragon Princes if you really wanted to instead of Sword Masters, but I wouldn't personally recommend it. Or you could even Monster Mash, probably. I haven't really done a Monster Mash against dwarves personally, but I get the feeling like it would be pretty effective, actually. Just have like a Lore of Life Wizard instead of the High Mage, and just have them use Regrowth as you're flying in to sort of breathe fire across their missile units. Once you've got those all dealt with, you could probably just charge in with your White Lions and muck about with the Terror and rear charges. Anyway, hope you found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.